Hello, this is my third video on self-hosting Google Fonts. In the first video, I asked the question whether we should self-host and covered the pros and cons there. In the second video, I talked about a free plugin on the WordPress repository called OMGF, which makes the whole process very easy. In this video, I wanted to talk about the benefits of loading them manually and particularly concentrating on the new variable fonts, which I believe is going to be the future of web fonts. That's certainly what Google think. And although at the time of recording this there are only 112 variable fonts out of the over 1,000 that Google have, I'm sure that's going to rapidly change. And if you don't know what a variable font is, it is in Google's format, so it's WUF2, which is the most compressed format, but it is one file that will allow you to display different weights. In fact, it's more flexible than individually having to load those weights, those individual files, because you can choose weights within the standard weights, and it does a lot more, which I can't cover in this video. Let me recap on what our options are for Google Fonts. So we can go the easy route, which is to call Google CDN through our theme, and Google will always deliver us the most compressed file size of the time. It's always going to be browser compatible. One of the dangers with self-hosting is that browsers can change and perhaps you'll have some display issues with some of your fonts. You will automatically get the latest advances from Google CDN, including those 112 variable fonts. But on the downside, depending on the location of your visitors and your server, it may not help you deliver the fastest page load. And Google often recommends self-hosting because you get full control over how your fonts will load. So you can use preloading, which you can't really safely do with Google CDN because they change their file names all the time. And for some people, it's just not an option, particularly those in Germany, because of GDPR concerns. With the OMGF plugin, then it's very easy to improve your page loads, and it gives you very easy control over how your fonts display. So you just select to have them preload, but you are dependent on them for their choice of font files, which are not likely to be the most compressed version. In fact, I don't believe they are serving any variable fonts at the moment. Also, you'll need to go to the pro version if you want to do things like set a fallback font, which I'll talk about in this video. Presently, I'm not doing that, but I may be in the future. And if you want to do something simple, such as remove their file that's got their font CSS in it and move it into your own style sheet, then you're going to need to be on the pro version. Ultimately, because of the way that this plugin works, where it relies on you making a call out to Google CDN to know what to do, it intercepts that. You can't really make your site client proof. They can always go in there and load in a new font and it will just be added by this plugin, and you may not want that to happen. So if we manually load them, we get complete control over our fonts for free. We can turn it off so it's no longer connecting to Google CDN. But on the downside of things is that you're going to need to find your font files. You need to consider something that Google does for you, the site maintenance, whether things are going to change with browser support for your files. And ultimately, the thing that's got me stuck for some time is having a strategy. And I think I've got one at the moment, and that's what I'm going to share here. But let me first talk about where you get the font files from. So on Google's site itself, they don't give you the web format, so you will either need to take what's there and convert it yourself using a third party, or you're going to need to use another service which has done that work for you. And one of the most popular, and there's lots of articles about it, is Google Web Font Helper, which is what I started with, but then I realized there are some issues thanks to Zach Pyle, who's in the Beaver Builder community. But I'll walk through the process of using this because it'll allow me to cover just some of the things to look out for when you're manually loading your own fonts. Let's go over to their site because it is fabulous, the work that's been done. It's just not been updated recently. So when you come here, you can still use it. I've used it for some of my sites here, so it's not that it's out of the question, but I'll cover later the downsides of it. So you search for the Google font that you want and select it here, and then at the top you can choose which character sets you want. It's pre-ticked to Latin, which is all I ever need. Then you pick the weights that you're going to use, and then it will automatically generate the CSS that you're going to need, your font CSS. So you only need the files and the CSS, and it defaults to best support here, which means that you will download lots of other files for old browsers. I don't think this is needed any longer. I would be happy for those people on old browsers just to be served up a system font. So I would always be moving to modern browsers, which is giving you the WOOF format and the WOOF2 format. But here I would really argue, I guess, why I think this is now getting further out of date, that I'm not sure if we really need the WOOF format any longer. So, but it gives you the CSS that you need. There is one thing which I think is quite important, because I made this mistake, is where you're going to put your folder on your install for your fonts. And if you're using the OMGF plugin, that's going to put it not in your root, but it actually put it in your uploads folder. Probably if you're doing this yourself, the most sensible place to put this is, let's just go over to my FTP, is where your child theme is. So you'll just need to go into the WP-contents, into your theme, into your child theme, and then put the fonts in there. And what you'll need to do is to just grab that URL, including the / before the WP-content, and place that here. If you put it in the root, the problem is if you add some custom post types and content within that, or you have a subdirectory and then content within that, then you're likely to break the connection to your fonts. And probably, as I found, I didn't see it when I had done this because of browser caching. I thought everything was fine, but really there were 404s. So that's just something to watch out for. Particularly, again, I made the mistake of leaving off the / and it only showed on the home page. So there are a couple of little gotchas if you're not careful. And then all you need to do is to download the files and then just upload those. It just gives you the files that you need for this, and then you can just copy and paste this, and I'm going to place it over on this site over here. Now people will disagree on what I'm doing here. I'm actually using the customizer. Typically I would put all my CSS in my styles.css file in my theme, but in this case what I found is that it doesn't always work too well. So if I place it here, it's going to be internal stuff, it's going to be printed out on the actual page, and it's always going to work. So I place this here, and then it's going to work. Now we have two options really from this point here, because at the moment my theme is calling some fonts, it's picking out which font family I want. So the route that I go now is to just actually turn off the fonts. So let's just go into this. If I go to my headings, it's calling the font family here. All I need to do then is to go and disable it. So I've got a script, it's on my documentation over here if you're a Beaver theme or plugin user. But what I tend to do is I will just add this using WP Codebox, which is my new tool for snippets, and just turn that on. And that disables the Google fonts calling out to the CDN for my theme and my plugin. It depends on what theme you have. Some of them allow you just to turn that off. That's the approach that I could go. But another approach which I started with was to go into each of these and then turn those to a system font. So my theme was no longer calling anything, and then I would go back to my CSS, and somewhere down the bottom, let me just go and grab a snippet. I would just put in my headers in the CSS here and call that this way. So all my headers and my paragraphs and stuff was calling the font family that I wanted over here. So that's the two routes, but as I say, I don't go this route. I let the theme decide what my font family is, and then I just turn off the theme's ability to call the Google CDN. Hope that makes sense. Okay, so that's all you need to do to go through this way, and that's pretty much all there is to it. Now the downside of this is that it's not really been updated for 4 years, and probably more like 7 years before the author was really doing any work on it. And when we look at the issues here, we can see there are some fonts which are just not behaving properly. If we look over here, we've got a filter, but we'll see that there are none for variable fonts. So you're always going to get these formats over here. And the kind of thing that you see that is reported, you'll get some display issues with certain browsers like you've got over here. And I don't think these are getting corrected. So the tool that was recommended to me and was created because of these kind of issues is this one called Web Font Loader, which is absolutely fine. It's not as easy to use, so let me just show you what you get with this. If I can just find the file. Bear with me, let's just open up my zip. So this is what you get downloaded. You get absolutely everything that you could need and you probably don't want, and it includes the variable fonts with this one, so I would only have the option anyway for my standard to go with the WooF2 there, but I've got all the other things in here. And what you'll see with this is, if I just call this up, we've got all of the font faces here, so you would need to go and pick out what you wanted for this, and probably it would be easier once you've done it a few times. You're likely to have your own that you set up, and again, it's something that I will put in as WP code box as a snippet to deliver this in the future. So it's not such a big thing, and the nice thing about this is the fact that you can actually search on your variable fonts here, so you can find them from here. But what you'll see here is I mentioned there's 112 and there's only 102, so it's behind, and I've noticed it's also a little bit behind on the compression as well. So this is useful, I think, to go to, and I am using this, but I was aware, because of the fact of the support usually a single author, I wanted another route. So what I decided to do as my practice was to grab them just directly from Google. So this, and I'll go through it on here on my documentation. So my present strategy is to start my projects, and if I've got the choice over the fonts, what I will be doing is I will go over to Google themselves and take a look at what variable fonts they have available. So I'm up to date with this one, and see if these are going to be suitable for my project. Now, because of the size of the variable fonts being larger, I will want to make sure that I'm only selecting these ones really if I'm going to need 2 or more weights with this. So that's the way I will start. I've also decided that I don't need to support, I think, other formats other than WooF2. So having a look at, can I use, this is getting updated all the time. Since the last video, we've had increased support for WooF2. So there's, under 4% of people who won't see your web fonts if you're only using this, and I think most of the time I'm going to be happy for them to just get a system font or a fallback font if I decide to set that. And I'm not going to bother with the WooF, because although it's got the extra support for IE11, that's rapidly disappearing. So that's the route that I've decided to go as part of my strategy. I may adjust this over time, and then what I will do is I will start building out my site, call in Google CDN via my theme, and then when I've finished with everything that I'm doing, so on this site that I'm looking at here, I've called in 4 different weights, and what I'll do is when I'm ready to convert over, once I've finished the project, I will go over and use something like Speed Vitals or GT Metrics, something which gives me the waterfall, and then I can go down and find the file that Google's serving up at that particular time and just download this, rename it. There is one other step that I will do just to check what my font can actually do, what Google's given me, and I will upload it to this site, which I mentioned in another video, Wacomay Fundu, and this is the beta version of it. You can go to the root directory here and use their one that they've got at the moment, and I just go in here and just check that the font is doing what I want. Generally though, I will have checked the variable font on Google to see what weights it actually contains. This one goes right down to 100 to 900 here, and you can set any of the numbers in between with this one. The reason I go here as well, if I'm doing it this route, I will take the snippet that I've got here, but I like to set the Unicode range to that particular font, so I'll see how updated that is, and that's why I will go over down here and I will grab only this. I ignore this. Now what it does is when you upload it, it says work sans regular here, and I tried that, but of course what I didn't realize is that my theme is actually looking for work sans, so I had to drop the regular off that, and then I just decided to go my own route. And what you'll see here is, and I tried this out as well, that you can set the font weight as a range from 100 to 900, and I tried that as well. But what I found is that it seemed to break the ability to use faux italics. So what I've needed to do instead is, if I go over to the site where I've got this set up, I've needed to put one in for every single weight that I've got here. So a little bit more complex. I'm not quite sure why this italic thing isn't working. There is one other thing that I need to do, which all of them recommend. You're supposed to show your license somewhere on this, so you can easily kind of get this one by just going over to Google attributions. I've put that on my main document, and what I've done, as I don't know where to put it, I think you can put it as a file in your fonts folder, but what I've decided to do is to just place this in the CSS itself over here. And yes, that's it. As I mentioned before, I just turn off the connection to the Google CDN, and then that's pretty much me ready to go. Okay, so I think that's covered all of the basics here. There was a couple, I don't know, just one other thing I needed to mention, and that was something that's new and I'm looking out for at the moment. In an earlier video, I was talking about using preloading and also using the font display, and I changed from the regular swap to block because I was preloading my font and I wanted the font to come in because I didn't like the ugly swap that you'll get over. So if you set font display swap, which is a kind of standard way, it stops on certain browsers such as Chrome and Firefox this invisible text that you might get before your font loads. So you set it to swap and it will show a system font until your font is actually loading. I didn't like the flash that you get with this because if a system font isn't going to be similar to the font you're loading, you get this kind of changeover which is fairly ugly. I got around this by adding in system block and preloading. But there is a new technique which hasn't got much supported at the moment. And in fact, to show you it, I had to put on Firefox, but someone's done a demonstration. So it's font size adjust on this. And what you can do, and this is a nice demonstration of it. So they've got the font of Georgia here on the body, and then it's got an active font that you're bringing in over here. And they've lined them up so you can see how that is. They're not lined up very well, but if you use this font size adjust here, you can adjust it so it gets very close to the size of the font that you're trying to load. So instead of doing the technique that I did in another video, when this is more supported, if it gets to be more supported, then I think that might be the solution, and I will go back to not using block and always be using swap if I can make the system font work with it. Anyway, that was an awful lot of detail. Thank you if you've managed to stick with me for this length of time. I hope to see you in another video. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.